Hello, I'm Sinta Ebersohn. I'm the founder of Get Up and Grow, an online community where we consciously cultivate resilient families by working on all aspects of life, be it emotional, physical, mental, social, whatever you can think of, we cultivate resilience. With me here today is Lehandra Riley. She's a specialist wellness counselor and also a music teacher. Lehandra, welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me, Sinta. I'm very excited to be here today. And I think we're going to have a very exciting and fruitful time together during this interview.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to it. Lehandra, just to start off with, please tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to do the kind of work that you do.
So I think I can go back quite far, but I think the first official educational qualification that I got was my bachelor's in musicology. So I went to go study music because I've always had a very soft spot for music in terms of my own emotional resilience, coping skills, and using music as a tool for expression. Then I went further. I studied education. So I did my postgrad certificate in education. And I've been a teacher for more than a decade in public and private schools. I've worked with your little ones, your grade ones, up until matric. I've taught grade little babies. I've taught class music. I've taught music as a subject for grade 12 learners. I've walked the process with them. So I have quite an extensive experience in creative arts, music, and I've taught drama as well. So I've really enjoyed it, but the private practice bug has bit me. So while I was still, doing my well, not doing my training, but I was doing my training for my honors in psychology with a focus on psychological counseling while I was still a teacher. So that took me some time because I think if I were to study full time, I wouldn't have really managed with that. So I think I spaced out my honors over 2 years or so, and basically finished my research report, which is your mini thesis. I finished that in 20. When did I finish that? Probably in 2020, because I graduated in 2021. So in the COVID period, I did my research report. I had to adapt that quite a bit because of the lockdown. So that was quite interesting. And during that period, I was actually supposed, my husband and I, we were thinking of immigrating. And we didn't know COVID was going to hit. We didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. I had to give 3 weeks notice as a teacher because, you have to give a whole term's notice, unfortunately, not just a month. And gave it in the beginning of 2020. March came, no job, and everything is closed. In a way, it was a good thing for me because I think at that time in my career, I was quite burnt out. I was quite tired and I needed some time to rest. So I think it was a blessing in disguise for me to just take a breather, just rest, and also focus on that research report I was still busy doing. So it gave me time to just be a student and just finish my study. Then I also did my in-service because I heard of ACHP. I just started volunteering at a local NPO because I can't sit still and do nothing. It makes me a little bit crazy. So I thought to myself, how can I give back to my community? And there was a big need for counselors in my community, and especially at this NPO. And then they told me about ACHP through the NPO and said, you know what, there's another way. There's an alternative body you can register with, and then you can use your hours to help you with that registration, which I didn't know at the time. I was just volunteering because I wanted to give back and, apply some of the things that I've learned during the course of my studies. So I did about 60 hours there in 2020. Then 2021, I went back into the school system. But then that was my swan song. That was my last year in education because I realized that for me to find my own fulfillment, I needed to branch out and do my own thing. And I wanted to go into private practice. And currently I'm putting it out there in the universe. I'm in the process of applying for my master's in music therapy. And I think if I didn't walk the road that I walked up to now, I wouldn't have been as equipped to do so. So in a way, everything came together quite well. And
So
I
you're
think
exactly where you need to be.
absolutely. And the counseling just kept calling me back. And then how I married the music and the counseling was by offering Music for Wellness. It's a program that I created, which is music lessons, but with a twist. So it's not just if you want to sort of work towards your grades, or your music grades go from grade 1 to 8, and then you get your diplomas and your licentiates and whatever else, you can work towards that. But Music for Wellness is more about what does the music mean for you, and how can that be used as a tool to help you in your personal growth and in your personal wellness journey, also as a non-verbal modality for expression. So that's what I've been doing, and it's been quite fulfilling. And at the end of the day, it's not just we're sitting and talking. There's little talking here and there, but we're mostly focusing on integrating the emotions and the feelings into the music and learning music that the clients enjoy, whether that be teens that I see or adults. Everyone has their music that they enjoy and that they want to express themselves with. And it's not that they aim for performing for an audience, it's more your self-fulfillment. And it's you completed the journey with this piece or whatever else. So I find that quite exciting.
I must say, it sounds quite interesting, and I can't wait for us to get into that. But before we do, just briefly tell us, I know that you play a number of instruments yourself, and I'm curious to know about that, because I grew up learning music as well. I learned to play the violin, piano, but I'm ashamed to say I don't play anymore. I became lazy. But please tell us, what are your instruments?
Well, Sinta, maybe we can jam sometime if we can get together and just make music for fun. You know, we don't have to be at a certain standard all the time. It's literally just about engaging with the music for the sake of music. But I'd love to be able to play strings. I can't, unfortunately. I haven't been trained in strings or woodwind or things like that. The closest I get to woodwind is probably a recorder, which is, you know, sort of a transitioning instrument if you want to do flute or oboe, clarinet or whatnot. So my primary instrument is vocals, which is quite interesting because vocals, your whole body is the instrument. Contrary to popular belief, it's not just the vocal cords, it's the whole body. And I must say that has the reason why I gravitated towards vocals so much is the breathing aspect, the aspects of connecting with the body. So that's my primary instrument. It just, it gets a bit annoying when you're a bit fluish or when you have a bit of allergies and your resonance chambers, which is in your face, your sinal cavities are blocked, and then you can't resonate or sing as good as you could when you're not sick. But there's ways around it, and, you know, drink your black tea with your honey and your whatnot and just get better. Then I also play guitar, I play keyboard, piano. And that's about the breadth of my extensive experience in music and in instruments. And of course, light djembe drumming. I mean, I think anybody can sort of connect with a djembe drum. I've always wanted to learn the full set, but I'm left-handed, so I'd probably have to swap the set around because I feel the beats on the left side of my body. But I play orthodox in terms of guitar. I didn't swap my strings or anything like that. So yeah, that's about the extent of my musical knowledge, and I play the fool sometimes as well. So,
we need that one too. Hey?
Absolutely.
So let's jump in and tell me, what is the healing power of music? How does it help us to heal, and how do you apply it in your wellness work?
It's one of those things, we can intellectualize it, but I think how we can experience it is just by tapping into the energy of music. So I think the best way to sort of give a practical example is to think of music that anybody that's listening to this can think of a piece they really enjoy, any music, whether that be classical, rock, heavy metal, a ballad, whatever you like. Think of a song you like. And the moment you listen to the song, what does your body do? Do you just sit there passive, or do you feel like you want to move? Do you feel like you're singing the melody in your head? There's some other engagement, is there not, with music that we enjoy? And that is the healing power of music. It doesn't take much for us to engage with it. That's the first thing. And it's a language that's universal. In other words, we can all relate to music. Even though we all have our different tastes and preferences, we can all understand music in terms of the fact that the music that sort of tickles our fancy that we prefer elicits a response in us. And it's not a negative response. I'm not talking about music that's, triggering. I'm talking about, your things that you do enjoy. It does have a response in the body. And because it's got a rhythmic response, we all have heartbeats. So I used to ask the kids when I used to teach music, how do we know music is alive? Because it has a beat, just like we have beats in our hearts. So from the beginning of a piece to the end, the music has pulse, consistent rhythm, and we can match our energy and rhythm with that music. And then it's the thing of we can create the narrative and bring our emotional narrative into the music space. And that helps with the healing process because it's so simple. There's no talking required. There's no over intellectualization or explanation required. We can just interact. And for example, let's say we feel particularly angry one day. We can just beat a drum, or we can listen to music that makes us feel we want to move. And then there's a physical expression or a somatic expression of that emotion. And that to me is the profound connection that music has. And you can do that on your own. Music therapy is of course a guided process where you have intense therapy, but not intense. Well, I think it's not intense in the sense that it's like psychotherapy. It's a more holistic, natural, artistic approach to therapy. But I think it's more guided, and then you'll get more activities and specific directional things where the music is sort of, the therapist sort of speaks to the need of the client. Not that I'm a music therapist, like I said, not at all, but I'd hope to study that someday. But it is nice to have a facilitator, or even just like when you have a supportive or holistic counselor, just holding space with somebody already makes a profound difference. Just making music with someone and holding that musical space, even if that means we just appreciate the same music together, it already creates rapport, and that already helps. So it can be used as an supportive tool in counseling for counselors that don't necessarily have a degree in music, but they can use it as a supportive tool, such as, for example, creating a playlist, a guided playlist where you put songs on that motivate you, that inspires joy, or that you want to do your carpool karaoke with, so that you can get a bit of confidence in just being silly sometimes. So in a nutshell, I would say that's what's coming to mind to answer that question.
Yeah. So it's interesting, I know from personal experience, to be able to make music yourself is literally therapeutic, and to be able to make music together with other people. I've played in orchestras and things like that as a child, is a profound experience and a bonding experience also. But then even if you're not able to make music yourself, just playing something and listening to it, like you said, is a way of connecting with people and also connecting with yourself. And what I love about what you said is the music seems to me to be a way to engage a person as a whole. Whereas if I think of other therapeutic or counseling modalities and therapies and things that we have, we either engaging the brain, or we have to do specific exercises to engage the body, or to get the mind and the body and the soul to connect while we're doing some personal work or trauma work or whatever it is we're doing. But with music, it seems like such an easy way to engage everything, because your body naturally responds and your mind is thinking, whether you're singing along in the lyrics or you're just listening to the melody or whatever, and your soul is in there with it. So it's actually a wonderful thing, hey?
and it's very profound. It's not, we can't really quantify it or explain it without experiencing it. I think it's one of those things where if you've experienced music for music's sake, not for, I would say when you study music, it's a completely different approach, because there's this sort of strive for perfectionism the whole time. Sort of you have to fit in this box, right? But just the art of music making, or just the activity, or the process of music making, that is the profound healing tool. That there's no end goal. We're not sort of striving to be the most perfect person in terms of playing something. We don't strive to be that. It's okay if you do. That is your joy, and that is what your plan is. Go for it. But I think just like Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence is like, you've got naturalistic intelligence, you've got linguistic intelligence, mathematical intelligence. Music is an intelligence onto itself that we all have. Some of us have more development in that area, especially if we from small have been introduced to music. That's why it's such a wonderful tool for kids, because it helps with the neuroplasticity of the brain, and it actually engages the whole brain because of various factors, such as if you engage with sheet music, where you read the music, you are reading something. If you play an instrument with regards to piano, you've got a left hand and a right hand doing two completely opposite things. So it helps with your fine motor skills as well, and also for your brain to have almost like a polyrhythmic and a polymelodic thing going on, because the left hand is doing a different rhythm to the right, and pitching. So you have to listen. Am I playing the correct notes? Or is what I'm reading translating into the music? Also your sense of balance, your sense of continuity, keeping time. I actually wrote down how it actually engages the whole brain. For example, engage your occipital lobe, where you read the music, your temporal lobe, which helps you process the sound, your frontal lobe, that helps you engage with the music and make it make sense in terms of your emotion and your stamp that you sort of put onto it, because you can listen to covers of various songs, but each cover has its own authenticity and character.
Like
and
then,
yes, so for example, that's why music that has been, let's say, done by the original artist is there, but then someone else comes out with a cover and they just touch on a different aspect of that. And it just wows people and makes you see the music from a different perspective. So one example of that would be, and I mean, I personally have been listening to metal music since I was a teen, and Disturbed was one of the bands that I used to listen to. And now everybody knows who Disturbed is because of Sound of Silence, but that's a Simon and Garfunkel song.
Yeah.
So it just shows you how putting your own unique essence and stamp onto music doesn't necessarily mean you're stealing someone else's music. It just means we're sharing, and it's in a collaborative spirit and nature that we do that. And that's the whole idea behind Music for Wellness, is taking a song and putting your own essence and authenticity into it. And that's where the power lies.
It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So if I could tie that into parenting or resilient parenting, most parents hear or read somewhere along the line, play Mozart to your children because it helps them with their maths and all that sort of stuff. And you mentioned the neuroplasticity and all the aspects of the brain, all the different areas of the brain that are engaged when you're busy with music. What can we as parents do in terms of music? How can we use music, apply music in our everyday lives to help our children to create resilience, and what skills are we going to teach them with that?
Right. So I think, firstly, interesting question that you asked about, baby Mozart and those types of music that parents play for their kids, even while they're pregnant, while the mom is pregnant with baby, they sometimes play classical music and the like. I actually have a blog post, a very interesting one, about music at birth. That's the name of the blog post, which goes a little bit more into the prenatal tips regarding what to do with music. But in essence, whatever music mom likes, So in other words, it doesn't have to be Mozart. For example, I know a lot of parents want to engage with classical music with their kids. That's wonderful. And yes, we're going to get to why that helps for studying and the like. But while mom is pregnant, if she listens to any music that makes her move and makes her feel calm and makes her feel happy, baby picks up on those endorphins. So it's good to play music that while mom is pregnant, that soothes mom and that gives mom a sense of calm and stress relief, because then that lowers your cortisol levels, and that's healthy for baby, healthy for mom. So there's nothing wrong with listening to the music you usually listen to. Even if there's a swear word or two into it, baby's not going to learn that. We can always bleep that out when baby has a sense of language awareness, even though baby can have some concept of language before birth. But in terms of now baby has been born, baby is starting to learn. So I would always say play any music, but don't dumb it down. So don't dumb the music down so that it's the same as Gugu Gaga language. Just speak as you would usually speak. Don't make up babble noises or babble words or stuff unless that's the point of the song. Yes, unless it's a silly song where there's humming or something involved, where the point of the music is to be silly. But, play for the music. You can play Debussy. You can play anything that calms baby. And there's a lot of beautiful classical things, such as, your traditional lullaby that you have, that da-di-dum, da-di-dum. That's a lullaby. So any lullabies, there's a lot of traditional lullabies culturally that has a lot of significance as well. That's also been orally, from an ethnomusicology point of view, been passed down through the generations, which is also profound and can be used. But in terms of learning, I would say your Baroque music from the Baroque era, like your Bach and your harpsichord, those things, it does help with when you study in terms of the mathematical aspect of it, because it's counterpoint, it's very much rigid and structured in a very specific way. So what I say is use that if that helps, but not if today's kids not all of them like classical music. So it doesn't help you play something and then the person says, oh, my ears are bleeding, I hate this. So I would say when you study, to help with studying, find music that the child likes, but that child doesn't like too much. Because the moment they like it too much, they're not going to study. They're going to vibe too much.
They're going to get distracted, eh?
Absolutely. So I would say put something, especially instrumental, something instrumental in the background with a consistent pulse. Not too all over the place, a consistent pulse. That's why I said that your Baroque music helps with that, because of the consistent pulse. And at the end of the day, the whole trick is that if you become as focused as you should become when studying, you can't even remember the music because you're so focused on what you are doing. The music is just there to sort of create a calming atmosphere, but it mustn't be too calming to the point where it's so relaxing you're going to fall asleep.
Yes.
So finding that balance is quite important. So in terms of classical music for studying, they also call it, has to do with your brain waves and that sort of thing, would be the Baroque music from the Baroque era, piano music from that era. But once again, different strokes for different folks. People vibe differently to music. So finding that music that you can put on in the background that's not going to distract in terms of irritate or make you overly engage with it. It must just be there and a consistent sound, and it must be something like a comfort. So it mustn't be something that takes away from the learning experience.
So it's not just a background music. It's different from that, eh?
It's different from like your mall music or your music that I would say is your cheese and wine music. What I would say, find music that works for you in the study environment. So let's say the child puts on old school rock music and that helps him study. The proof is in the pudding. It either helps the child or it doesn't. So I wouldn't be quick to dismiss and say, don't listen to that music. Maybe it helps that person. But I would rather, for example, opt for an instrumental version of that music. Maybe look for some acoustic music or something that's not too vocal, because the moment they sing lyrics and you're studying and you're usually engaging with something that uses words, it can be cross-coding there. In other words, you're going to listen to the lyric instead of listening in your brain to what you are reading.
Yes.
And some people use music where they take the instrumental and they actually they make a song out of what they're learning. So they'll literally make the lyrics out of the little piece that they're learning. And there's some teachers that do it as well. So it's like what the head bone's connected to the neck bone. That's not a very silly one, but some people take a song, some teachers take a song, and then they explain very intricate concepts by changing the lyrics, and they take a song the kids love, and then the kids remember the work. Then they sing the song in the exam and write down the answers. So it all has to do with your approach and, you know, how you sort of want to approach it. As if you're more of a teen and you just like, I want to put something on that's going to keep me focused, constant beat. In other words, you're looking for something between, I would say, 100 to 120 beats per minute. So like that, not faster than that, above that pulse, but also not something that's slow like that, because then it's going to slow your heart rate down and then you're going to become sleepy because your heart rate sometimes matches the music. So I would say something that keeps you open wakker, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's I want to share a story of my own two children when they were smaller, just to illustrate likes and dislikes and how music works. So my first son comes along, and when he was 4, the younger son was born. But we used to travel in the car a lot and play all the kiddie songs and sing along. We knew all the words and the lyrics, and we had great fun when we were driving in the car. So along comes little brother, and the moment we put on those children's songs, he would scream blue murder in his car seat. He could not stand it. He wanted heavy metal. And from the day he was born. And we would put...
It sounds like my spirit animal.
As soon as we put the heavy metal on, he would sit there and he would like go like this with his...
He'd head bang.
He just loved it from day one, and he would scream blue murder if the kiddie songs came on. All the children's favorites that kids can, you know how children can listen to the same music ad nauseum, like they watch the same
like
movie.
Baby Shark and that stuff.
This child of mine would not have it. And to this day, interestingly enough, he has a much more varied taste in music than the older son, who was easier with or more relaxed about, you know, compliant. So actually, maybe that's not the right word. He's got weird taste, the younger one, some like really weird music that he likes. But it was, you know, it was indicative of that, I think, right from the start. But yeah, so different strokes for different folks, eh?
Absolutely. And I think also it builds tolerance, because especially if you have a family, especially if you have 2 children with this extremely different tastes in music. Like, for example, you can have one child who loves pop music just for loving it, not necessarily wanting to like it because other people like it. They just like it. And then you have your little metal head there banging out the numbers. Then it's also creating tolerance as well, because obviously you can't just listen to one child's music the whole time and neglect the other one by never listening to their one. So it's also sort of then finding a music genre that sort of blends the two worlds. Where you sort of, there is even, I want to say, metal for kids, where they take the metal songs and they make it more child friendly as well. Especially, you know, a lot of parents will worry, but the swear words, the content, sometimes it's violent or whatever. Same with rap. Sometimes it can be a bit inappropriate for kids, but there are more child-friendly versions of certain songs. And there's nothing wrong with liking what you like. I think it's all about how your body responds to it and how you respond to it. Because I'm sure if you play instrumental metal to him, he'd love it just as much as the lyrical metal.
And I do believe get clean version. They call it clean versions of
Yes,
some
the
of
clean
the metal
version.
music
Yes,
also, hey, that don't have the
yes,
swear words and things. Because I used to play,
absolutely,
the music is fine, but I don't want to hear those swear words. So then my
absolutely.
kids started playing the clean versions of the songs. Because
Yes,
sometimes
clean.
the beat is good, you know, or
The
the
beat's
even the rhythm.
wonderful,
Sometimes it's good music. It's just the
definitely.
swearing is a
And
bit. So,
yeah, and I mean, I understand that when your kids become more adults, more your late teens, you know, we're not going to kid ourselves. They swear, they're just polite in front of their parents. And it's okay to swear now and then. It's all about, I would say, why are you doing it and what is the purpose of it?
yeah.
Not swearing at people. There's a difference between bumping your toe and saying a swear word than swearing at someone down the street where you sort of direct that anger at the person. And
Yeah.
it's just all about being respectful, I think, and a time and a place for everything. But also at the same time, even if there isn't swear words in some music, like you say, the clean version also edits out the, say, any profanity or more or promiscuous content or content that's actually a little bit inappropriate for children,
Yes.
such as, you know, sometimes sexual content. Like, for
Mm.
example, the children love the WAP song, if you know what that is. But the song in its name is actually a swear word and it refers to very overtly sexual things, but they like the beat. So I actually saw a meme or a version, a cover version where it says something about the person was singing the song about being old, but they take it like, you know, how aging affects them, but they took that whole song and they changed the lyrics and it actually was so funny, but you could still enjoy the beat, you know, you don't have to sort of discredit the rhythm or the beat. But yeah, clean versions, very good, or even the radio versions, that also works because on the radio they're also not going to play profanities and things like that, especially, you know, on most of the radio stations during the daytime if they don't have like an alternative or so. So radio versions as well, also good.
So if I'm thinking now again, because I'm coming back to parenting all the time, it's a communication tool. It's a way for us to express ourselves, even if we're listening to the music and not making it ourselves. And so many musicians out there, or are probably most of them, have a lot to say with their music. So they are also communicating to the world. And I think I'm thinking of certain musicians that have become famous through the times because they were addressing controversial issues of their lifetime, sensitive topics that were problems, you know, when they were alive or in the era.
But for example, John Lennon, for example, and he got shot because of what he was saying.
Yeah. So there's a lot, music carries a lot of emotion for all of us. And like I said, it's a communication tool, but it can also be a barrier sometimes to emotional connection. Can you maybe give us an example of how have you experienced that? How have you seen that?
It can become a barrier in terms of relating to other people, especially if music tastes are profound, like profoundly different. So, for example, you know, there's certain music that doesn't speak to me. But it's not about whether I enjoy it or not. It's about seeing the joy in the other people listening to it. For example, let's say my parents are listening to music they really enjoy, which would be Afrikaans music or Buddha music or whatever. And I don't like that. And if my parents is listening to this interview, they'll laugh because they know it's like, I don't like it. It irks me. But it's not about me. It's about me seeing the joy when they listen to that music and seeing how it relaxes them. And then every now and then putting something on that we can all enjoy. So the barrier comes in when there's no tolerance. When it's a thing of when I do something such as just put the music off and say, oh no, we're not listening to that. And that's vice versa. If your child is listening to music, it's very important if you don't like the music. It's all about preference. I can't logically say to somebody, stop listening to music that you're listening to because I don't like it. That's not an appropriate response. It's a different thing if your child's engaging in music that influences their behavior in a negative way, such as they become more violent, or they swear more, they become more disrespectful towards authority, or it's just absolutely not a positive influence on them.
Mm.
It would be better to tell the children or the child or the teen, put your music a little bit, if it's too loud, we have to respect the whole household, but have a conversation about the music, not while they're listening to it, for example, because then they might see it as I'm being judged. I'm being judged for my preference. And that creates a barrier, because even though the parent's intention is good, by talking to their child and saying, listen, have you listened to the lyrics? Have you really engaged with this music to a point where you understand the effect it's having on you? Let's have a conversation about that. But that time and place, once again, I don't think it's appropriate to just walk into the child's room, put the music off and say, oh, we're not listening to that crap. Because when you say that, the child hears what I like and what I'm into, I'm being validated in that space. My preferences are being invalidated. And the same goes vice versa. Just like you don't do that to your parents when they listen to their music that might make you feel like you want to do this. It's all about, thinking a little bit further, and also being tolerant and having open conversations in a space where it's neutral. Also not in the child's bedroom. Talk in the lounge or in the common area and have a casual conversation. It doesn't have to be, I want to say, a family meeting about Johnny's taste in music, because then you may put the child on the spot as well, then the child feels awkward. So it's all about just having an organic chat like we're doing now. It's all about just talking and, allowing and being tolerant and respectful of everybody's preferences. So the barrier comes in the way you communicate, not necessarily your intent behind the communication. And also, sort of thinking, how would my message come across? Because if we want the child to listen to music that's uplifting or helpful to them, but at the same time, we don't want to invalidate their taste. So I would say that could be maybe a barrier there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm remembering a scene from Michael Jackson's music video of the song Black and White that starts with little Macaulay Culkin playing his music, and you hear the dad banging on the door. Doof, doof, doof. He says, turn that down or something. And I'm listening to it. This is the best part. I remember that now. Just... yeah, classic scene of parents being intolerant of children's music, but then probably also children being a bit inconsiderate by playing it too loud. So music is a common denominator. It can connect us to each other, and it can also be a barrier between us.
Especially if we live with other people in the same house and we all have all this exuberant tastes. I think it all creates a balance. And also sometimes people have sensory issues. So let's say you have someone who's a child that's neurodivergent, who is sensitive sensory. So in other words, your son wants to play the music loud, but your other son, for example, has autism or is sensory sensitive. So it's not that your music is too loud for other people, but for that child, it's actually too much for that child. So then I would say compromise, put your headphones on and listen to, then you can put it as loud as you like. Obviously, I wouldn't suggest going too loud because you can actually damage your ears. But putting your headphones on and watching your movie or listening to your music where you don't sort of put someone else in distress in doing that activity, because it is an auditory activity after all. So it's all about just being a considerate person. Just be considerate for everyone in the home.
And to be honest, I'm the first one to say often this music needs to be played loudly to enjoy it. And I know you mentioned earlier that you saw the enjoyment in your parents, you see the enjoyment in other people when they listen to the music. And I think that's also part of it. Some music just is great to be experienced loud. And if one can focus on seeing that enjoyment, maybe that bodily movement and everything that goes with it, we can enjoy it along with the people instead of just being irritated by it.
definitely. And also time and place. There's a difference between people having, let's say, a house party, putting their music loud, but it's over a weekend. It's understandable, than doing it 3 o'clock at night in a weekday when everybody's asleep and preparing for work. I think it's just also having that awareness and communicating. It's all about communicating. We're not saying you have to ask permission to play your music. It's all about just saying, listen, we're going to be playing it. We're playing it at a reasonable time. Just a heads up, FYI. It's the same as people practicing music. A lot of musicians will understand, especially if they play an instrument, that you can't really mute. You can't really mute drums unless you have an electronic drum kit or trombone or a saxophone. It's going to get annoying for your neighbors because your neighbors hear the same, let's say, scale being played like 50 times. So it's also finding time and space and wiggle room for people to just not let the music become something that irks them to the point where it distresses them. So, and it's also live and let live at the end of the day. Because I would say, like you said, rightfully so, seeing how you can also enjoy the music and engage. And, you know, I think a heads up would be nice if you're a lot of people in one house and you say, you know, Saturday's fun day. Saturday, we're going to play our music loud. And then the son that likes his music loud can engage with that. And that's give and take, that we don't just have to, you know, sort of just over compromise on the one end, if that makes sense.
Very true. So Lehandra, let me take a dive into parental roles and how we connect with our children. Something I think most of us are familiar with, maybe not in detail, but we've all heard about learning styles and we've heard about communication styles. But you said there's a listening style also. Tell us more about that.
So your listening style is how you absorb what you are hearing. So some people, if you listen, a listening style would refer to what do you hear? How do you differentiate between something important and noise? And this is very difficult for people with sensory issues. For example, the classroom is making a lot of noise and teachers talking in front. Some people, it's a type of deafness. I can't remember what it is. It's not deafness in the traditional sense of the word, that is a disability. But it basically means that person cannot hear the teacher's voice throughout that crowd of voices. So, and that happens to me sometimes. If it's too loud, it's almost like I just hear shh. I don't hear the teacher talking, for example. So that would be I don't call it a disability, but a disadvantage in terms of listening. But listening style would be, if we listen to music, you can do this as an experiment for yourself after this, but it's basically listening to any piece of music and sort of what grabs you first. Rhythm, melody, texture, language, what grabs you in a song. And that is your listening style. So for example, let's say I enjoy the tone. So for me, the first thing that grabs me is, for example, listening to tone, meaning tone and timbre, that's a texture. So so for example, piano can play a note and a guitar can play a note. It's the exact same note, but you can hear the difference between a piano and a guitar. That's the texture. So that grabs me, the texture of the music. So in other words, when someone were to communicate verbally to me, not what they're saying would grab me first, but the tone of their voice would grab me first, and their inflections would grab me first. And that would be my listening style. Whereas some people focus more on what is being said. They would, to the letter, like listen to the lyrics very intently and follow the lyrics. Then what is being said is more important than how it is being said in terms of a listening style. The other thing is also the rhythm. So, for example, some people cannot follow a lecture or a speech or anything like that if it's too fast or if it's too slow. So then they're very sensitive to the speed of or the tempo of how something is being carried out. And I find that sometimes as well. Sometimes if someone speaks too slow, especially on a WhatsApp voice note, I speed that voice note up. And then my husband would be like, how do you follow that? That person's talking a mile a minute. I'm like, I'm following it, because if it's too slow, I lose the essence of what's being said. So that's what I mean by listening styles. It's not necessarily an an official thing, but that's just as a musician, music teacher, what I've picked up in terms of kids and how sometimes it's important to slow down your speech. And also I've been scribing lately as well, which is basically you sit with the kids, they're writing exams. So scribing would be you write on their behalf, you can read or you can prompt. So when I read as well, I make sure, am I reading at a speed that's comfortable for that learner? Because maybe they need me to read a bit slower or faster, because if I read too slowly, they lose their train of thought. So that's what I mean by listening styles or ways of receiving auditory information that could be different. Also, volume.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable information for parents as well, because we often speak to our children and they don't respond, and we say, "You're not listening to me," or they possibly did not hear you, or
they did not receive the way you were. Yeah, the way you were communicating wasn't received. And it's not about what you are saying. A lot of the times it's how you are saying it. And also, I would say that's why volume is also important. So there's a difference between sometimes when I'm very passionate, I start speaking louder, and I'm not always aware of that. It's just me being passionate. But sometimes I have to become more aware of that, because I don't want it to come across as I'm shouting at somebody. And a lot of people, especially if they've suffered trauma, is with kids as well, the moment you raise your voice, they're not going to listen to you whatsoever. You might as well press mute on yourself. They're just going to hear noise. And that is the main thing, is also using a very calm tone of voice when you speak to your children, especially when you're trying to get them to do something or to comply in some way, shape, or form. And not projecting your frustration into your voice, tone of voice, when you say pick something up. They saying, pick your clothes up, please, is different to saying, please pick your clothes up, or pick your clothes up, please. The one sounds like, I would say, a gentle request. The other one sounds like, you're annoyed with me. What did I do now? Like, especially with teens, they'll sit there minding their own business. Mom is so irritated because laundry hasn't been done. I wanted to say there's mold growing in the house. It's like, can we just get some order in this household? Mom is irritated, for example. Not that I'm saying dads don't get irritated as well, just an example. And then, like, pick your clothes up. Da, 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 da. It's like, I'm chill on my bed. I'm lying here very calm. And you're coming into my space with that noise and just basically giving me the feeling that I did something now and I'm just sitting on my bed. And would that child be really inclined to listen or to do what you're saying? No. Who would? I mean, if someone comes into my space and starts talking to me like that, I'll be like, hold on. Let's just calm down first before we do anything else. So I would say, sort of try and think, if your child spoke to you in that way, would you be inclined to also sort of pick up what they're putting down? So it's a thing of trying to also, as much as you are frustrated, just watching how you communicate what you're communicating. You can still put a boundary down and be firm and say, you know what, if you don't want your clothes to be washed, cool, but then you're going to have dirty clothes and you're going to go to school with unwashed clothes, or you're going to have to do it yourself. It's fine, but not sort of projecting that anger or that frustration onto the situation, because that is a lot of the times why kids don't listen, because they feel that they hear instantly they're doing something wrong, especially if they're calm and in their own space, doing their own thing, playing calmly or listening to music or just being, behaved. And now they're just being told the vibe is disturbed, basically.
Yeah, it's very disruptive.
Absolutely. They might be in a very serene state of mind, and now someone's barging into their room and just barking orders. I mean, it's not very inviting in terms of the spirit of, let's help mom clean. It's more of an invitation. Let's help mom clean. And, if it comes down to a consequence where your room must be clean. If it's not clean, then there's a consequence, but we don't have to get angry about it. The consequence is the consequence. So if you don't clean your room, fine, you don't clean your room, but then the consequence will be there, meaning you will do your own laundry, or you will have to wash your own dishes, or whatever it is, whatever the consequence may be. So it's all about the how, the method of doing something, not necessarily the intention behind what is being said.
I found, because I work a lot with families who've gone through divorce and blended families. And I've seen so often that two families are now together, but they have a totally different way of communicating with each other. And they're sitting around the table having dinner. And this one part of the family that kind of grew up together, they talk loudly and they laugh and they're noisy and they're carrying on and everybody's having a whale of a time. But this other part of the family, who are more quiet, reserved people, are flabbergasted. It feels to them as if this lot is fighting with each other.
Yes. I resonate with that.
Yeah, listening to you, it reminds me of this, and I think a lot of it's probably got to do with the tone and the volume and all those, I almost want to say, like musical sensitivities that people have, eh?
And also your culture. Culture plays a big role in that. Your cultural upbringing is paramount, because in certain cultures, it is actually rude for a child to look you directly in the eye. It's seen as disrespectful, or it's seen as disrespectful to talk over someone. Whereas in other cultures, you're never going to get a word in if you actually don't chip in at some point, and it's not seen as disrespectful. And what you're saying is actually so interesting, because my dad and I would sometimes have these very passionate conversations, to the point where an outsider would think, oh my goodness, what's going on in this house? But it's not when we're talking very passionately. Like I say, it's almost like there's a crescendo happening. The sound is gradually increasing there. And that's not the issue. When we ignore each other and we don't talk, that's when you know there's a problem, and that we are at loggerheads, or we having a mental war with one another or something. But my gran and my grandpa used to live in a flat adjacent to the house. And then my dad and I would have a very passionate conversation about something, a spirited debate. I didn't take away from it that he was attacking me. He didn't take away from he was feeling attacked. We were just very spirited and passionate. I sometimes joke and say, maybe somewhere in our bloodline we're Italian or something, because Italian people also tend to get very spirited. And then my gran would be going to my mom and like, why is Lehandra and Johan fighting? And my mom's like, we look at it fighting, we're not fighting. No one is upset here. We're just having a very spirited conversation. But because, like I say, we don't notice our tone of voice is increasing, then other people might interpret that as we're fighting. But we're just having a spirited conversation. So that's why, once again, the listening styles are different for us. I don't hear my dad as being shouting at me. I just see him as very passionate about his point. And I get that. To me, that sounds like a crescendo in music. That's where the music builds up to a climax and to a highlight. That's what I'm hearing. But other people might not hear it like that, because that listening style doesn't compute with them of how they hearing that. But it's also important with blended families to be inclusive. So to find a compromised style that suits everyone around the table, so that no one feels othered. I would say that they don't feel like the one side is sort of taking over and the other side is just sitting there passively. And I think what would help is inviting. When you see someone is withdrawing a little bit, invite them to participate in that conversation. Invite them to also share how they feel, even if that means they say 2 words. That's better than just passively just sitting there and feeling sort of excluded, So you also gave me some memories from childhood and that sort of thing. And that it's interesting how all these things sort of come back and relate. Now you have all these stories that it makes sense.
Talking about the different ways we do things and the different ways we perceive things and enjoy things, I'm thinking about love languages and how people's choice in music or music preference can actually correspond with their love language. Have you ever thought of that?
That's extremely interesting. I haven't actually thought of that, but it makes a lot of sense to me because, for example, you have your five love languages, which is physical touch, gifts, words of affirmation, acts of service, and quality time. A lot of the times music encompasses all of those things. Imagine I give you a guitar as a present. There's physical touch because you have something you can physically hold. It's a gift. And even if you bought the guitar yourself and you make music and you share that music with others, that's the act of gift. And it's an act of service. For example, if someone says, you know what, they're sad, they need cheering up, they want you to play a song for them, that's an act of service. And quality time, the family is sitting together listening to someone make music. I think it's an holistic approach to love languages. Music can be a very holistic approach. So it all depends. No matter what your love language is, it can be expressed in music in different ways, shape, and form. And I find that with the physical touch a lot, like having an instrument you can physically touch. I think that's the one thing with vocals that's very difficult because you are the instrument. So there's no touching involved there. So I think that's the one thing that I would say to sort of bridge the gap there is to play piano or guitar while you sing. And then that incorporates if your love language or your comfort is more physical touch, to have that hold that instrument and to play something tactile, to have something to touch. And that's why in vocal lessons, for example, I would also say there's a lot of figurative thinking and metaphorical thinking in terms of singing and manipulating the pitch. I sometimes incorporate things such as a scarf, where I would say, put the scarf on your shoulders so you can feel the weight of it in terms of making you feel more grounded. So there's ways of incorporating that into your music, absolutely. But I do think also that, it can be a very holistic experience where you get to sort of experience a little bit of everything, depending on how you approach it.
I can see how that can work. And I just want to take a step back to, you spoke earlier about validation, and I want to add acknowledgement to that. What do we do, or what would you recommend to a parent to do with a child who sings his or her heart out, but they're tone deaf? It's totally false. What comes out there is potentially as painful as that child practicing the violin for an hour. And I mean, I've been there myself. How do we as parents handle that and validate our children, acknowledge their effort, and so that they can still feel safe and
enjoy the music? I think that music should be always something to enjoy. And, it's a very tricky situation and a delicate situation because I had to deal with these types of tricky scenarios, like when you do audition for choir and you have a very spirited child who really wants to sing, but they cannot pitch whatsoever. Now, a lot of times there can be various reasons for that because, yes, you do get people that are tone deaf, which unfortunately it's very difficult for them. They cannot hear the pitch in their head. So the pitch that they cannot hear the difference between they can't hear the difference between those two things, and that's a semitone apart. And the thing is, you can work with those children and give them those skills and get them to play perhaps another instrument. Because a lot of the times, just because they can't sing, that doesn't mean they're not musical. So sort of encourage them to do something that's a little bit different where they can express tone. Because sometimes for example, I've had kids who are fabulous at the piano, at the guitar, whatever other instrument, but they can't sing to save their lives. But they're wonderful musicians. So it doesn't necessarily mean if they can't sing, they can't do something else. However, let's say their heart is now set on singing and you don't want to break their spirit. Then you gently have a conversation with them and say, you know what, I appreciate your passion and your spirit in singing. I can see you're very passionate about it. But my darling, there is a difference between, if we break the music down, what you are singing and what other people are hearing. So if you're singing for enjoyment, do sing in your room, do sing in the shower, but do understand that you're struggling with pitch. And that is something that, for example, I've helped plenty of people that couldn't sing, and then they would be able to, because it's, you train that person to hear that pitch. And then you give them that opportunity to train and to, if they really, really have a passion about singing, get a vocal coach to sit and teach them about pitch and hearing the different pitches. And if it comes down to them being tone deaf, you explain it to them. I would say just don't we don't want to enable the behavior or put them under false pretense of, oh, you sing so wonderful, and be lying to the child in essence, and then they open themselves up for abuse or ridicule from other people. That's also what we have to be very careful about, and sort of tell them that there's a difference between how the music is being produced from your instrument as to how it should sound. And once they understand that, there's a logical reason. It's not that you're trying to insult the person and say you're a bad person or you're a horrible singer. Because the sensitivity comes in there that this is your instrument, your body, yourself is your instrument. And that's why singing is such a sensitive way of approaching that. But when in doubt, find yourself a vocal coach or someone that can break it down and explain it in a musical way and in an academic way, that it's not focused on there's something wrong with the child because they can't sing properly. Not everybody can sing well, and that's okay. But don't stop singing. Do enjoy yourself. I want to say, close your door and have your shower hour where you sing in the shower and you still enjoy the music, and it's okay. I don't want to say never sing because you're tone deaf. You can still sing, but just don't make a profession out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I would say, because there's some people I know in my personal life who can't sing. They can't, like they would say, carry a tune in a bucket. But when they really enjoy the song, they would, like they would say in Afrikaans, neerie, like or sing like they would say, if you know, liewe heksie, so op een noot. And that's okay. If you enjoy that music, it's okay. Just don't, I want to say, give the person false hope and tell them they're going to be on the stage one day and sing. We don't want to encourage that either, because I think then you open that child, like I said, up to being ridiculed or having a very difficult experience in the world.
Lehandra, this is very valuable information. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I have a last question for you, and this might be a tough one. Social media is flooded with little children singing, and they sound like opera singers. Or tiny little toddlers playing the piano like you've never seen in your life. What is your view on that? And I want to ask you, because you're a vocalist, to maybe comment specifically on the singing. I have a pet peeve with these children who are small. Their voices haven't matured yet, and they take on these voices. They're actually mimicking other people. What does that mean for that child? Is it harmful?
It can be.
How should parents handle this? Should they encourage children to do that? I'd love to know what your view is.
Sure. So I'm going to start with the instrumental bit of it. You get geniuses or savants who they'll hear something and they'll just play. They've never had any instruction or training, and they can sit in front of the piano and just by ear, orally, play. Still, that's a beautiful skill, and that shows that child has an above average IQ and they've got a gift. With that being said, they don't have the emotional maturity to communicate with the music. Like, for example, I'm going to use a vocal example now. Let's say the child has that, and I'm going to get to the vocal to answer your question specifically about that, because it can be dangerous, especially classical training. But we're going to get into that shortly. But if you think of I'm trying to think of a piano piece that I can sort of illustrate my point. Like, let's take something by Chopin. Okay, let's take I'm trying to think of what it is, if it's one of his etudes or whatever. But it's basically thinking of, why did the composer compose this piece? What was the intention behind it? For example, let's say there's heartbreak in that. A child of 3 or 2, even though they can play it perfectly, they can't communicate that heartbreak because they don't know what that means. Yes. They haven't lived yet. They don't have life experiences. It's the same thing as I can memorize a dictionary and give you the definition of any word you tell me. But do I comprehend what that definition of that word means? And that's, the expression is completely gone. It's the same thing as if a robot were to play the music. There's no, the humanness is not there in terms of the human experience. That's why it's very important to give children, when you do educate them in terms of music, it's okay to play what you like. But when you play what you like, what are you putting into it? What part of your lived experiences is being communicated through this music? And with classical music, it's just as apparent whether you have words attached to it or not. So with that being said, it's not necessarily harmful for a little kid to play piano, for example, and play things way above their station. But it won't be as authentically received because there's lived experience or sense of depth that cannot be communicated by a little baby, because that music piece was written in terms of heartbreak, for heartbreak. Like if we take a very, I want to say, oversung piece from Madame Butterfly, that is O Mio Babino Caro. I don't know if you know that song. So that's about heartbreak. It's about, please don't take this guy from me. I love him so much. And now you have a 7-year-old singing that. How can they authentically communicate what that song is about? Now we get the problem there is not just the authenticity, but what is happening biologically in the body there. So a child's voice biologically is completely different to a mature person's voice. And we see that very clearly with boys when their voices break. But girls' voices go through a change too. When I was about 12, 13, I couldn't sing at all. I couldn't pitch. It was like I was tone deaf because my voice hasn't settled yet. So what I'm hearing in my head and what my voice is communicating didn't match. That's what I'm saying. When a child doesn't necessarily pitch correctly, it doesn't mean they can't sing. Their voice might be going through changes, or they need some additional training. And once they have it, they can sing fine. And I noticed that break, I needed that training again, because I needed my mature voice. I needed control over that again. Now, what happens is somebody actually explained it so well, and I don't have a rubber band on hand, but you only have one voice. And if you take a rubber band and you stretch it beyond its capacity, what will happen to it? It won't spring back. It will remain puffed and stretched out, and sometimes it will snap. So overuse of the voice, or pushing the voice into to sing things that are not written for child voice, you're pushing it beyond that child's capacity for range. Because what would happen is we all have a range in terms of how low can you sing and how high can you sing. Now, children can sing pretty high sometimes. A lot of them can sing high, but sometimes it tends to go into a falsetto. It's not necessarily a head voice. So, and if you put it there the whole time, it's almost like you're pushing that child's voice to the limit the whole time. That voice is going to take strain. And then when that voice matures, the chances of developing nodes on your vocal cords very high, and that nodes will prevent you from pitching. It will create sliding when you pitch. Like you'll sing a note and then all of a sudden your voice will clip, like it will move into a different thing. And that's dangerous, and sometimes it can cause scarring and permanent damage. And those notes can get removed, but what will happen is you will have to be basically silent for a long time to let your voice heal, and you don't want to put your voice out of commission like that. So I would say sing things that are meant for the voice and for the range of the child's voice. And there will be things in terms of operatic music, such as trills, such as embellishments that's meant for for the mature voice that the
Yeah.
child is not supposed to do. But there are beautiful classical pieces that are written for children. So you can still, within the framework, give them things that are meant for their voice and will not biologically harm the voice to the point where you can't buy a new one. You can always, I can break the piano. I can take a hammer and break my piano and buy a new one. I can't do that to my voice. And that's why singing is so dangerous when we put ourselves in positions with songs and with material that's not suited for our voices. And that's also why when you do vocal training, know your range, know what is your limits, low and high, and stay within your range and sing comfortably 80% of the time. In a training session, you can push a little bit further beyond the envelope, but pushing it too far, especially if you envision yourself on a stage one day, very, very careful not to, like they would say, I can't think of the English for this, maar jy moet nie die persoon ryp druk nie, if that makes sense. You mustn't push the person to be ready before their time. I always say that to me, every person, or even specifically children, are like flowers. They bloom in their own time. We can't force them to bloom prematurely. And also knowing what type of flower you're dealing with, what type of soil they need, what type of sun they need. So just being very gentle and realizing there's so much time left for that child to sing that aria and to really give it a go than forcing that child to sing it when they're not ready. For example, they can rather sing something like Castle on a Cloud from The Miz that is written for a child's voice. And that still carries that beautiful bel canto, bell-like quality to the song, rather than just forcing yourself into a more mature role. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked you this question because it's something that actually is relevant to many, many, many children, especially in this day and age where it's become a fashionable thing to sing like grown-ups, and they're damaging their voices. But I want to also add to that, if a child is singing a piece that's not for their age or not for their voice, and you mentioned they don't have the emotional understanding of that song, they're actually missing out on a whole beautiful piece or a whole beautiful part of that music because they can't learn that part of it because they're simply too young to grasp it. They're missing out, so they're going to learn music kind of in isolation without the whole story and the richness around it. So they're losing out by doing it also.
And by that, I don't say don't listen to the music or engage with it, but engage with it as a musician now when you have the capacity to do so. I would say it's not harmful to play that song for a child and have them enjoy and sort of try and hum it or enjoy it in a listening way, in a receptive way. Because like you say, so much is lost. It's almost like it's the difference between seeing a picture in black and white and seeing a picture in color. It's almost like it's such an elementary engagement with the music. And it's the same with stories. And I love reading, as I'm sure you do as well. So I would also encourage, especially like with kids that have a very above average reading level, so the kiddie books for them, I would always say, just because you finish reading a book doesn't mean when you're at a later stage in your life, even as an adult, I oftentimes go and read books I've read as a teenager. And then I see so many things I've missed as a teenager because of my life experiences. So I always invite, even if you sang a child song as a child, like for example, Castle on a Cloud, as an adult, I'm going to revisit that song and sing it. And then I'm going to see, you know what, I'm singing that now as an adult. And now there's different meaning to the song for me than, when I was a child. So it's all about sort of revisiting music also at different stages in your life and not sort of saying, oh, that's just for kids. Because you can, and also that's where the nostalgia comes in and the neuroplasticity comes in. Because if you play songs from the youth of, let's say, an Alzheimer or dementia patient, and you play that for them, they won't know that what their daughter or their son looks like. The moment they hear that music, they're back in their childhood home. And they remember things that were locked in parts of their brain and sort of stuck. And then you get a part of that person back again. So that's also the profoundness of music and how it's important to revisit music that you've enjoyed at different stages in your life, not only as a musician, but as a human that enjoys music as well.
Wonderful. We are so blessed with having music. It's such a profound part of our existence. Hey.
And
Lehandra, thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to note that sometimes it's so beautiful to me how animals also enjoy music.
Yes.
And how music transcends even species. So it's so interesting to me how if I make music, how my cat will literally, she'll be sitting there, she'll like, this is interesting. Then she'll wiggle her way closer and open her ears and listen. And sometimes I accidentally step on her because I don't even notice she wiggled her way under the piano chair when I'm playing piano or something. So it even transcends humanness. Even there's even an animal component to it. So I just thought that was interesting to also mention. Sorry for interrupting you.
It's beautiful, yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been a most interesting conversation. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really engaging and full of enjoyment from my side. Thank you so much.